Yes, we are looking at the current proposals that are on the table, both from developed and developing countries. And we have been kind of filling these proposals into these categories that you saw on the previous slide. We have also done a look at the estimates of BAU emissions because there is a certain, I would say there's a certain debate, obviously, to be had. Will be the overall emissions globally under BAU conditions exactly 61 gigatons as assumed in the McKinsey Global Greenhouse Gas Abatement Cost Curve, or will it be 60 or 59? And when we look at the literature, our 61 gigatons are a little bit on the higher end. So assuming both the divergences in the literature on BAU plus some effects of the economic downturn, maybe the required abatement could be 15 to 17. You see it on the left side. We work so far with 17, but we could be lucky, could be only 15. Second, we have looked and analyzed the kind of proposals that are on the table. And if we look at a high case, we have divided the proposals from the various countries into a high case, which is, for example, for Europe, the 30% below 1990, and into a low case, which is for Europe, the 20% below 1990. In the US, for example, the low case would be the legislation that is already enacted by the Obama administration on mileage standards, also some impact of the stimulus package. And that would be the low case, and the high case we have taken Waxman-Markey for the moment. So adding this all up together, it adds up to 5.2 gigatons below our BAU, or 18% below 1990. And out of these, we have also made an estimate how much the various offset limits that are under discussion, and obviously in some countries this is not yet determined, but we have come up to a rough estimate that out of these 5.2 gigatons, around 1.3 is likely to be done via offsetting, could be a bit more, and 3.9 would be domestic reductions. If we look at the developing world, we see that the overall announced actions add up to 4.2 gigatons below BAU, or 11% below this BAU. So we have not yet been able to determine which part of this will be self-financed, which part will be financed with public finance. But it gives us an order of magnitude what is available in terms of actions from developing countries, which leaves us a gap of 6 to 8 gigatons to a 450 ppm pathway. So there is still quite a considerable gap to be closed. We have furthermore looked at what developing countries need to do in order to make a deal along the lines that Jules has presented happen. So our analysis of the 5 gigatons domestic plus 9 gigatons of support for developing countries action, and those 9 gigatons subdivided into 3 with carbon finance under aggregate 25% cap, and 6 of public finance. So, but if we say it's our required abatement might be slightly lower due to lower BAU, it might be 4 to 6. Now, if we divide these 3 components, which are here depicted as 1, 2, and 3, according to a certain rule, we can derive a benchmark what each developed countries would need to deliver. And the first component, the domestic abatement, we are dividing up according to the geographical location of the abatement opportunity under 60 euro per ton. So essentially there's a certain part of these 5 gigatons that are located in the US, another part which are located geographically in the EU, others in Russia, Japan, and so on. The other 2 parts, the column 2 and 3, the carbon finance and the public finance, we have, as a very rough first cut, divided up according to a key which takes into account the polluter pays and the ability to pay principle, represented by GDP and current emissions. Now, if we do this, I mean, obviously that's a very rough metric, but it, as a first cut, it gives us an idea what individual countries ought to come up with. If we do this, we come to the next picture, and that's a bit a complex but still useful picture. You see on the left side, essentially the contributions from various countries, their kind of fair share according to that benchmark, and this is composed out of domestic reductions, carbon market finance, and public finance. And you see that, and this is all against BAU in gigatons, and you see it adds up for the US to 5.5 gigatons below BAU, for the EU 27, 4.4, for Japan 1.3, and for the total developed 13.8. Now, the high case of the current proposals you see in the middle, and essentially you see that under Waxman-Markey you will have a total of 2.5 gigatons of abatement, out of which 0.7 would be public finance. We interpret the set aside for forestry reductions, which is on top of that, which is not offsetting, but which is on top of the cap, as public finance. So you find it represented here. And we have taken maybe an overly kind of aggressive assumption that the full offset possibilities in Waxman-Markey of 1 gigaton would be exploited. It might be in reality then turn out to be less, but that's how we depicted that. But you see at the moment the 2.5 gigatons in the US under Waxman-Markey, and this would lead, on the other hand, to a gap to the benchmark of 3.0 gigatons, out of which 1.7 would be essentially a public finance gap, and 1.2 would be essentially a gap in domestic abatement. So essentially, under this assumption, US would not fully exploit its domestic abatement opportunities. We have, under the current proposal high case, we have depicted a 30% reduction of EU below 1990. The EU has not yet defined how much offsetting will be allowed under a 30% reduction. So we have simply put an arbitrary number here. So the distinction between the dark green and the lighter green is arbitrary, but it was important for us to have the overall abatement currently represented, not the exact distinction between, in that case, offsetting and domestic reductions. But these add up to 1.6 gigatons against the benchmark of 4.4. We have not yet represented the financing from the European Union, because apparently the European Council, as most of you will know, has not yet stated how much money the European Union would be able, public finance, European Union would be able to contribute to the financing requirements. In Japan, you see that there is also quite a considerable amount of abatement in terms of the cap. We have also arbitrarily drawn a line between offsetting and domestic reductions, but the gap there essentially is a public finance gap. Yes, maybe. What does this lead us to if we look this collectively?